Rimaniamo in questa dimensione legata ai dati con Annette Dortmund, che invito a prendere posto sul podio. Annette è in forza a OCLC dal 2001, attualmente è Senior Product Manager, è una ricercatrice che ha un passato di lavoro con numerose biblioteche europee di diversa tipologia e dimensione. Il suo attuale focus di ricerca riguarda gli identificatori persistenti e Annette ci fornirà una panoramica dello stato dell'arte della ricerca e dello sviluppo che OCLC sta facendo su questo tema, sul tema del linked open data.
Thank you very much. So in terms of what we heard so far this morning, we are now not exactly leaving the library as a collection, but we are more in the sphere of library as a service. And we're also talking about a kind of infrastructure, a scaled infrastructure, global, regional infrastructure that facilitates knowledge creation, which, as we heard, and I would fully agree, still happens locally, before it can then be shared more broadly again. So I will talk a little bit about OCLC research and what we've done on, let me say, new metadata models. I will split my talk in two parts. The first one will be linked data. The second one will be on persistent identifiers, which is the one I'm much more familiar with. And of course, the two are linked, as you'll see in the end, obviously. So let me see if this works. No, it. Yeah. Hey, so linked data. A couple years ago, linked data was still a hype, I would say. It was a solution in search of a problem. I think we've gone beyond that. We've also left, I would argue, the valley of disillusionment. We are now moving up the slope of enlightenment, to speak in the terms of the Gartner hype cycle. We are beginning to fully understand how linked data can help us, where it can help us, and where it cannot help us. So why OCLC and linked data? Very briefly, this is not to be a commercial. Of course, OCLC has been at the forefront of making library data public as linked data for quite a while. We have enriched WorldCat, there's schema.org on WorldCat. VIAF has been mentioned. ISNI is not exactly an OCLC service, but we are closely linked to ISNI. We are operating ISNI. So we do have quite a lot of relationships with linked data. We've produced and released lots of linked data, so there is a lot of experience with that. And much of this, like VIAF, came out of research originally. We are still doing, so I need to be very, okay. And just if you are cataloging in the national authority file, you are participating in VIAF and you are creating linked data now. So we are still doing research in this area. There is still much we don't know yet. I cannot talk about everything here, but I can talk about the series of surveys we have done. Actually, my colleague Karen Smith-Yoshimura, an acknowledged expert in the field, has done these surveys. We started in 2014, and the reason for doing this was that at the time there was some talk about linked data, well, there were some projects, but there was a feeling, well, there must be more out there, but what is out there? What are libraries doing? Who is doing what? It wasn't well known, and so this first survey started to find out more about this. It got some, it collected some information. As often with these series of surveys, it didn't reach every single one. So a couple of important projects were missing. So we repeated the survey in 2015. And now lately, and this is why I'm mentioning this, we repeated it again. So we've got 4 years worth of data with this survey now, which now also allows us to talk a little bit about the trends. And this is very interesting. So you'll see the URL there, and you'll find them in the slides when we publish them. I encourage you to go to the publication and read what we found. I will just focus on one single finding. There's no time for more here. And this is the search of Wikidata as a source of linked data. So if you compare the dark ones are 215, the lighter ones are 218. The use of Wikidata as a source of linked data has quadrupled, so 4 times only 3 years later. And of course, as someone working for OCLC, I'm also quite happy to see that the use of worldcat.org and ISNI has also gone up. So Wikidata, what do libraries do with Wikidata? Well, we heard a little bit about this from my own experience from conferences where libraries present their projects, where they talk about using Wikidata. I can say they use it very often as authority data. They use it to obtain identifiers for something where through other means they cannot get identifiers, and they want identifiers in their data, so that's one part of usage. Something I'm also seeing is a surge in use of Wikibase. Wikibase is the underlying platform, so to speak. And some libraries with, say, special collections feel that having their own instance of this gives them more freedom, more flexibility in creating their own entities, their own relationships, in describing what they have or the knowledge they wish to express. Think about music, you know, traditional music, you want to say more than just I have this piece, but also it's played at this event, usually in this tone and usually with this instrument, and usually in connection to another, which may or may not be possible in Wikidata. So Wikibase is also on the rise, and this brings me to another research project, the linked data prototype we did. This is a statement from one of the participants. We need a shared community practice that isn't as restrictive and gives us more flexibility in what we can say about the entities and resources we're interested in. I think it's this piece of flexibility in what we can say that really is important here. So the linked data prototype was driven by the need of libraries to do just that kind of descriptive work for their standard resources, but also for special resources. And the idea was quite simply, well, can't we do this at scale? Can't we do this? Can't OCLC help us? I mean, I can't see every single library in the world to begin implementing Wikibases and creating their own infrastructure. The title of my talk is Shared Metadata. I still think there's a lot of opportunity for sharing here. So we did this, and it's not your usual pilot. You know, we build something, we have you tested, we call this a pilot, and then when it works, we sell it. This was a prototype. It was closely monitored by OCLC research also, because we felt there are a lot of open questions still, a lot we need to learn. This is not just a technology change, it's a change in mindset. To suddenly do all the work that you're normally doing in other tools are not able to do in such an environment. So what we did is first reconcile, well, basically this is pre-populate this instance of Wikibase with some data via WorldCat, Wikidata, and where it overlapped 1.2 million entities, just, you know, so it wasn't empty. And then the important point was enable all the participating institutions to actually do something with it, bring their use cases, their real life use cases, not just playing around, and try to create the entities and the relationships and edit them as they would if they had to just use this as their production service from now on. And this, of course, immediately spurred questions. Can we add entities? Can we add relationships? What should we do? What is good? What is quality? What is complete? How can we trust each other? Where do we start? Where do we end? So it was not just understanding the technology. Much of this was this psychological, I would even say, change of, well, I mean, I've lost all my policies and all my regulations. I need to find new ones. And how do we do this? And how do we do this together? This was fantastic and very interesting. Now, this is a screenshot. The ones in the back will not be able to see anything. I'm aware of that. Basically, if you've ever seen a Wikidata site, you'll be familiar with this. Well, it's Wikibase. The two main advantages of using this kind of platform was first that it allows for complexity while not insisting on it. So you can start small. If you're cataloging in a traditional format, you know there is such a thing as a minimal record, but it's still, you know, it's quite a lot. Here you can start small. If you just have a photo collection, you've got a photo, you've got a place, maybe a name, a date, you can start with just that. And then build on that over time, which means the barrier to entry is much lower, which is good. Second, it left this room for community discussion. Again, this is built into the platform. You can leave comments, you can add references for every single statement. You can see who made which changes. And I just talked about, well, this is a change in mindset. How can we trust each other? How can we know this is good? How can we trust someone doesn't hijack the information I filled in? Well, this is part of how we could create that kind of trust. You know, I can see there's transparency about who's doing what. So what are we doing with everything that came out of this? Well, on the first we're going to bring this into production because the participants were so fascinated by this that we're doing this, and we're in the design phase now. And I move on. But OCRC research is about scaling learning. And what this means is that we try to create that kind of knowledge and then share it. So we are compiling an extended report, technical and functional. I've seen a draft of it. It's really extensive, to share all the lessons we've learned, talk extensively about the project and everything we've done, so you don't have to go through all of these steps again when creating your own, maybe shared cooperative solutions. And then second, there'll also be a summary of all the linked data research we've done over the years coming forward. So, this was linked data. Now, we come to my pet topic, which is persistent identifiers. And I'll talk about persistent identifiers just in the context of one community, which is the scholarly communications landscape, but I'm pretty certain they exist in other communities just as well. So, scholarly communications, basically the life cycle of research. Oh, okay, let me legitimize what I'm saying here. We've done some research on this, and I'm just clicking through these. This is just to say LC Research has for a long time looked at identifiers, has also looked at the scholarly communications ecosystem, at research support as a library activity. On the left-hand side, you see what we did in the area of research information management. On the right-hand side, you see what we did in the area of research data management. And I was happy enough to co-author the two on the left. And in particular, in practices and in convenience and compliance. And if you think it sounds like Austin, yes, it does. That's what made us choose the title. Convenience and compliance, we looked at 3 countries in Europe and the use of persistent identifiers in research information management systems. So that's what got me started on the topic. So publishing, you'll have seen many cycles like this. They're all oversimplifying things, but still useful. Something is created, a researcher creates something, it's published in some way, then hopefully collected and made available, and then new research comes out of this because it's used. So I'm just clicking through this very quickly to say, well, today, of course, we've got many more actors here. We've got research workflow tools, we've got the repositories, preprint, data repositories, the CRIS systems, we've got networking tools like ResearchGate. So yes, it's becoming more and more complex. What's also new is research assessment is becoming more and more important, especially in some countries like the UK, but also Australia. Research assessment puts pressure on organizations, on universities, to create transparency about what is the output of their organizations. It creates pressure on researchers to manage their reputation, their output profiles. But also funders want to know where's my money going and what is coming out of it. And so this ecosystem is increasingly creating links and persistent identifiers to pull all this information together and to create that kind of transparency they want. So there are researcher identifiers, organization identifiers emerging, document IDs, of course, DOIs, but also dataset IDs. And we have citation IDs, We have funder IDs, we have grant IDs, and project IDs, and even some more not on the slide. All of these are either in existence or emerging. And with all these IDs, it's a lot easier to pull all this information together, as you can imagine. Now, why am I talking about this? What has this to do with libraries? Libraries are aware of this. Libraries very often are the ones who try to convince their researchers to use ORCID IDs. They use Scopus IDs to harvest metadata for their CRIS systems. So they're very much aware of this landscape. They're very much aware of the benefit it brings. I'm not convinced that this community, and it's again a simplification, but this community is equally aware of what you bring to the table. And there is a lot you can bring to the table. These identifiers are very smart, they work very well, but if you look at the metadata models behind it, the descriptive data, you will not always be very happy. Also, this community is about the now and the recent past. And that's fine, because that's what this is about. It's about the now and the recent past. So they talk about like the past 5 years maybe, in terms of reputation management, in terms of citation management. I was recently at Pidapalooza, a festival for persistent identifiers. They discussed a new organization ID. Their focus is researcher affiliation and the recent past. Well, as we know, the recent past is the future cultural heritage. Right? So there is some link to what you're doing. And the question is, what can we do? So when we interviewed institutions for the convenience and compliance report, what they said, well, we're looking at adopting this ORCID ID thing as a general identifier. Maybe this can help us to connect to this community. But then ORCID ID is a research identifier. It's created by researchers, and libraries would prefer to have something they maintain. So maybe we can do ISNI. ISNI is a name identifier, but then, then it isn't, because really it was at least created to be an identifier for people who create some kind of creative work. They write, they perform, they act, they sing, perform, whatever. So again, it's not a general purpose name identifier. So, but libraries are thinking about this. What can we do? At least the ones we talk to. And as far as we could see, there's no perfect solution, but at least I think we should think about this. So what can I do? I personally invest my time trying to understand this ecosystem as well as I can, and to identify these gaps where this community is doing something that maybe you're not doing, but you are doing something that could really help this community to say, okay, we don't need to take care of preservation because you do. We don't need to take care of changes over time. If you think of organization identifiers and the complexity of all of this, wow, we understand how complex this is. If they could rely on us to do this, maybe, I don't know. I don't have a solution. What I do is try to learn as much as I can about this ecosystem and identify these kind of discussion points. What OCLC's, have I gone back? Yes. No. Right. So what OCLC is doing, and this is still part of the linked data prototype I mentioned earlier, I just pulled this out, is to say, well, clearly, libraries need identifiers, not just authority files. They can be linked, and they should be linked, but we need something that works in this kind of ecosystem. But you also need something that is general purpose. Because you work maybe with the scholarly communications community, but you may also work with other communities, local communities, communities in a completely different setup using different identifiers. What you need is maybe something general purpose that can then link to all the other identifiers, because is no CLC person ID supposed to, I don't know, replace ORCID IDs? No, of course not. It's not. This is about linking, not about competition. Like everywhere in the linked data world and the persistent identifier world, it's about linking. So this is something we feel we can do, and as I said, this is not a commercial for OCLC, but I think this is the type of shared infrastructure that we all are called to create, and that we can create in a cooperative environment. And it also has the benefit that it can link to something that is used outside the libraries. So, new approaches to share data. I would say innovating data models helps data flow well through multiple systems and domains. This is the why we should be doing it. We shouldn't be doing it because it's a hype. We shouldn't be doing it because it's sexy. We shouldn't be doing it because, I don't know, it's the new thing. It's a means to an end, and this is the end. The end is creating these bridges, make data flow well, connect with domains that you're currently not well connected with, and not just connect at a personal level, but connect at the data level. Because if you think about it, even if you're active in this CRIS space, your CRIS is separate from the institutional repository, maybe, well, maybe not in Italy, but then it's separate from the other systems, so still many silos. We need to help data flow well across the institution, beyond the library, and maybe even to other domains. This is what all of this is about. And I think that this is a big opportunity for cooperation, a big opportunity for shared metadata, just as it was in the legacy world. There's absolutely no reason why any of us should do this alone. There's a lot of reason why to share what we can share, and to work on this cooperatively, so that you can then focus on the things that you really only can do alone because you're, I don't know, trying to describe your own researches or your own collections or whatever it is you're doing. Now, and the last thing, what can you do personally today? If you're not familiar with Wikidata, I would encourage you to become more familiar with Wikidata, because with every single edit, and be it only adding labels in Italian, you are contributing to the world's knowledge today. And the second is never, ever throw persistent identifiers away. Keep them somewhere. I know it's difficult in Mark, but keep them somewhere. Treat them like a pet. Feed them well. They will one day serve you, and probably soon. So this is my takeaway message. Some links for you. Thank you very much.